All right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for attending our Masterclass today. And I don't know if this is getting recorded, but hello from the past to anybody watching this as a future recording. We're so excited to talk to you guys today about componentizing your IAM journeys through orchestration and revolutionizing the development process. I figured I have to get the energy up because it's like 4 o'clock and we're standing between people and happy hour, so.
Right. Totally. All right, so my name is Michael Sanchez. I work at Ping Identity. I'm the principal architect and developer for the technical enablement team. I've been with Ping for about 5 years and actually came from one of their customers. But as far as my background, I've actually been a software developer for 20 plus years, probably more than I want to admit to. Worked on everything from healthcare integration for patient portals and consumer apps, and including content publishing systems as well. So after 20 years, I've probably seen it all at this point.
And I'm Remy Lyle. I'm the Senior Director of our Technical Enablement team at Ping. I've been in the identity space for close to 20 years, and I've served as a developer, an implementation engineer, support engineer, instructor. So I've been really lucky in the past 7 years to have worked for Ping and obviously leading our technical enablement team. So one might ask, what does a technical enablement team do? Michael and I always like to say that we are the most fun team at Ping. And part of the reason for that is we get to act as customer zero in a lot of cases. And we get to build real-world applications that utilize Ping products and services. So much so that if you look at the list of logos we have here, Michael and our team, we've invented our own multinational, multi-conglomerate, multi-industry, Fortune 1 company. As you can see, we have airlines, a food service company, financial services company, so all leveraging Ping. And we take the learnings from our own development cycles and share them with our field teams, as well as our partners. I don't know if we have any partners out here in the crowd, but as well as our customers. So at the end of it, we build real-world demonstrations that leverage Ping products and services. Okay, so it's 4 o'clock. We don't want to kill anybody. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like this is a stage question. We love this question so much. So if you've met Andre Durand, who's our CEO, he has a lot of what we call Andreisms. And one of probably his top ones is be extraordinary, to the point where it's on the floor mats of our office every time we walk in. So we're well, we might as well go all in and take inspiration from that, and we sort of branded all of our companies BX. So, but I love that question, and that's where that name comes from. So, we're a very powerful company, as you guys can see. So, cool. Okay, so we don't want to bore you guys with slides. It is 4 o'clock, and the beer crawl is following our talk. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you guys a couple of demonstrations of our BX environment in action. And one of the things that we just want to point out is, for the sake of time, as I point out, we have a number of demos, a number of environments, but we're going to focus on a specific set of journeys, as well as a specific company. In this case, we just picked our financial services vertical. And BX Finance, as you'll see in the upcoming slides, leverages Ping for a number of its customer journeys. So journeys such as self-service, passwordless registration, we have that scenario. We have adaptive authentication that honors user preferences at login, but then also injects intelligent risk signals as part of the authentication process. We have dynamic, transactional-based multi-factor authentication for when you're transferring money. We also have user consent management and real-time enforcement of those consents. And of course, what would a financial services demo be without OpenBanking? So we've also implemented an OpenBanking compliant flow that highlights dynamic authorization. So we have all of these journeys, and you guys will get to see some of them. We would have loved to show them live, but we were told that we probably can't rely on the Wi-Fi too much. So we're just going to show you guys the videos as if it were live, and we'll go from there. So
yeah, so it's just going to kind of set the stage and the foundation for where the conversation is going to go. So what everybody's used to, and set the context as we go from there. But yeah, so let's get started.
Can everybody see us? All right, good. Okay. Cool. And I think, yeah. I think it's playing right now, Michael.
Okay. Yeah, so this is what everybody expects, what you've seen at any website or application that you've seen. Somebody's coming in to register for a site. In this case, they're coming to register for online banking, filling out the basic information. Once they click next, they're actually going to get an option. Do I want to do passwordless authentication or password-based authentication? Obviously here we're going to choose device-based, so it's passwordless for more secure experience, but the person will choose that, will register and provision those devices that were part of the registration, and once then they can come and log in. Their username will get entered. They'll do a lookup, and then we'll put them through a second factor. In this case, for demonstration, we're just using email-based OTP, one-time passcode. But then once that gets sent to them, they'll be able to input it here, gets verified, and they go in. But it's a standard registration process you see for everything. People coming to some site, whether it's banking, retail, whatever that might be, just going through that registration experience to get them in.
Yep. And I guess the only thing we'll add is, as you notice, like right up front from the minute the user registers with BX Finance, we're already tailoring the experience for them, even making the authentication preference part of the registration process. So in the next couple slides, we will showcase the user journey of what, oh, I think you want to hit the next slide, Michael. Of what the user journey would look like with adaptive authentication. So BX Finance wants to redefine what a bank could be, and they have requested that user preferences at login be honored. So earlier in the first demo Michael showed you, the user chose a passwordless option. In this scenario, they chose a password-based login, the less secure login. But what you may or may not be realizing is in the background, there's a risk signal that's getting injected behind the scenes. So in the low risk scenario, the user is just signed in. In the next video that we'll play, we'll just show that when the authentication context changed, whether that's something different about how the user logs in, whether it's a user signal or a network signal or a device signal, you'll see that we still honor the user preferences at the time of login. But then we take the authentication context into account and appropriately step them up where we feel like it's necessary. And then contrast that with the sort of last option here in the high-risk scenario. So I'm sure you guys can predict in a high-risk scenario. So an example of this is, perhaps the user is typically logging in from Denver, Colorado every, Saturday morning at 10 a.m. And then all of a sudden they're, logging in from the Philippines, at 1 in the morning. So this again is a scenario where potentially we would block the authentication. So the point here is that the authentication journey is tailored to the requirements of BX Finance, where we are honoring preferences for how they want to authenticate. We're honoring the preferences, but also what context the user is coming in with, and then injecting, risk signals where we need to, and then appropriately asking the user for additional authentication mechanisms. And then we have profile management and consents.
Yeah, and so here with profile management consent, so now you already have your existing user, you know who they are, but things change over time. They're either going to need to change their address, their name, their phone number, various things like that, things that your company's going to want to keep track of, things that they might be using for monetization, whatever that might be. So profile management, obviously once they're logged in, authenticated, they can make those changes, and that can include things like consent management. How do I want to allow marketing or advertising teams to contact me about changes or services that they're now starting to offer?
And then here we're showing real-time consent enforcement, where somebody from marketing is trying to look up the user's information, and we'll see that the consents that the user have selected for their privacy preferences are honored in real time, which is why we're switching around the consent preferences there. And you'll see that if we try to look for the user again, you will see that now the data is updated so that we're not showing more than we have to. And all of this User journeys are requirements of BX Finance so that they can provide that wonderful user experience. And I think we can probably go to the next one. All right, and as promised, we also do have an OpenBanking demo in our environments. This one is OpenBanking compliant, and it does utilize 2 OAuth specs. So it uses PAR, Push Authorization Request, and CIBA in the backend for client-initiated back-channel authentication. So you'll notice here the user is buying a TV. Who doesn't want to buy a TV? And you'll see that the user is checking out in the middle of the checkout process. And one of the options for checking out is to leverage their bank account. So they're going to be redirected to BX Finance to complete their transaction. And per OpenBanking specifications, we're displaying the retailer, we're displaying the amount, we're displaying the different accounts that the user has access into. And because we're displaying a transaction code, and because the amount is over $1,000, there is an additional authentication request that's sent to the user. And now the user can go buy a TV and be happy that they got a great deal on it. So you might ask, let's go on to the next slide.
There we go. Yeah, so what did you just see? Like we were talking about, these were kind of setting the foundation for things that everybody's used to. Any website, application, services that your company has or anybody's company has, they're going to have all these experiences and journeys that somebody's going to go through. They're going to go from an unknown person to registering, and now you know who they are. But now they've got to be authenticated to use any of your services, possibly have to go through profile management to keep their records current with you that you might want to be utilizing, and then dynamic authorization for kind of any real-time transaction approvals that you might want to do dynamically across any of your services that you might want to approve. But things that you're used to, I mean, these are not new. These are things that happen on every website. And that's where we kind of want to go to, like, showing you how these can be orchestrated better and a lot easier. Yeah, and so a diagram, I'm sure, especially if there's any developers or engineering type people here in the room.
How many devs do we have in the room?
Or any engineering people that are used to. All right, one lie, but everybody else, okay. All right, but everybody's used to this. I mean, this kind of looks almost like a schematic for a PC board for like a Raspberry Pi or something, but you're used to this. I mean, you have multiple interfaces that you're calling out. You've got connectors running to multiple services. Those are either internal services, point-to-point integrations, APIs, but they can also be through external services, subscriptions that you have for other services that you want to bring into your company and use for your customers and things. And these get really complicated if you think about it. I mean, each of these things are development cycles that you're running through. It's all QA cycles. It's the SDLC for everything, but we understand how complicated this can get. You know, I mean, your QA cycles alone, once you start thinking about regression testing plus the testing of the new features. So this really starts to get really pain point. We went through this when we first started building our live demo applications for our products. You know, we have dozens of products that we can integrate with. So all of those were their own individual, you know, integrations that were going and services that we're hitting for some of our API-based things. And all of that was, you know, we got to experience this real time. So there's a lot of that. We understand like the refactoring and the recoding and the redeployments and the re-somethings that have to happen after you've done all this. So it's a lot of work. I mean, all of you that are in engineering, I mean, you get what this is like at the end of the day.
And remember, BX is a multi-industry company. So we didn't have to just do this for, you know, one vertical or one company. We had to do this for numerous verticals, right? So do I smell a revolution? Is that what's happening? That's what's happening.
Revolution calling?
Yeah.
Queensrÿche? Anybody?
Yeah. So revolution, you know, is sort of meaning, I mean, the official definition, sort of, is there a dramatic and you know, sort of wide-reaching change in the way that we should be thinking about this, right? So, you know, when we were going through, as Michael mentioned, like our development process, and I'm sure all of you guys can relate, where there's changes, not just to, I mean, this applies, by the way, across the board for all your user journeys, not just your identity and access management journeys, but what happens when they want to change the experience? We're under time crunch, like they want to release a new product and it has to be really smart, so we don't have a lot of time to make this change. We want to introduce, you know, new systems, new directories, new APIs, like things are constantly evolving, and there's so many, I mean, clearly this conference is full of, you know, new tech, right? So, and we obviously want to maintain, you know, optimal user experiences. So is there a different way that we can kind of think about this? So what if? Here's the idea. So what if we have this notion of componentization of user journeys? So stick with me here. So the idea is we first lift the connections to the directories, the service APIs, all the different services. And again, they don't even have to be identity and access management related. But we lift those connections out of our applications, as well as the portions of the user experience that we want to lift out. So things like the dialogue, the menu, like omni-channel experiences, right? Moving a user from one channel to another, and really lifting them out of that custom cement of the application that we have. Now that we have the services and the user experience sort of represented as pluggable, parts of a journey that we can build here in this red box here, we can now compose them together into what makes sense, and leveraging that to create a visual journey for what we want our users to go through when they're registering, when they're authenticating, or when they're doing open banking, or they're transferring money, or whatever the scenario might be, right? And using this orchestration layer to create these journeys that leverage these connections to our services as well as the user experience. But we don't stop there. So our orchestration layer also has the ability to provide widget integrations. So imagine now a scenario where you have all of these different workflows that you might have built in our orchestration layer, but instead throw them onto the application as widgets that get invoked. What you get is your application now, instead of, can you flip down, Michael? Instead of like this, Raspberry Pi spaghetti where your custom code is sort of having to navigate through these different services in this experience, if you go back, we streamline that process to where we take all of that custom cement out of our application and just plug them into our application as widgets, and we can invoke each one of these flows.
Yeah, just to level set with everybody here, just in case, so when we talk about widgets, we're talking about a modal UI. So widgets over the course of time have meant a lot of things, whether you go back to the old portal days of like Microsoft and stuff, but so a lot of different meanings. But we're talking about like a modal UI that can rise up over the surface of your existing application. Whoops, too far.
Yep, you're good. Next one.
Yeah, next one.
Yep.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so componentization of these user journeys. So we're talking about now, let's have a different perspective on how that development process works. So now we're talking about things about making changes to that journey, but now we're talking about doing it through leveraging a visual tool. So before making changes to that journey was the product managers, the marketing teams, or business operations, somebody coming and saying, hey, we need to do X, Y, Z. So now let's start that whole process, from analysis and requirements and development to what that means, impact analysis on what it might affect that's already there. But now we're talking about leveraging these visual tools and being able to quickly deploy those changes and actually even create this better separation of duties. So like developers, let's let the developers do what they do best. They work with analysis of code and applications and networks and systems, and then that complex business logic, let them do that, but let the IAM engineers and the AppSec people, let them focus on what they do best, and let them be able to manage what those journeys are like. And then on top of that, you can also have this like library of pre-built connectors. So you can have things that already exist and pull them in, but they don't have to be IAM based, like Remy was talking about earlier. These can be anything. So if you've got like some HTTP-based interface, then we can integrate with that. And also, you can also build your own connectors. And if any of you were actually in the session just before us, that whole session was about building those connectors. But you might have your own internal business systems that you want to integrate with and include in these orchestrations through the application's lifecycle, because this doesn't have to be security-based or IAM, identity security-based. So you can add all of those things in. And then once you've got that, like if you're familiar with like applications, you've got these classes you develop that end up becoming these reusable objects that you use from your library throughout multiple applications. Same principle here. You now have all these connectors and flows that become these reusable things that you can pretty much basically plug and play across all of your applications that you need to manage those journeys with.
All right. So just to kind of drill into the authoring process a little bit. So through our orchestration layer, you have the ability, and hopefully if you guys have seen some of the masterclasses before ours, you have the ability to drag and drop, whether it's fraud detection service, risk management service, identity verification service, something that's not even IAM related, right? And be able to plug them into that journey that you want to build for your user and create this flow that links your users to the digital outcome that you want. Any experience that you want, any service that you want, you have a single canvas to build those journeys. But remember, we're going to take the journey that you build here and create them as a component on your overall application that's going to host your workflow experiences. So.
Yeah, so if you look at orchestrating this experience, so now this diagram looks a lot better, right? It's no longer some looking like a schematic from a printed circuit board. So from here now, we've got this idea that we can have this basically this roadway, this freeway that kind of goes from any user to any asset, and you decide what their journey and experience is going to be along the way. Do I need to detect risk signals? Do I need to do verification for identity proofing because I need that higher level of assurance on that identity that's coming in? And then deciding whether or not they need to go through profile management, authentication, authorization, and then across the bottom. I mean, we've just kind of genericized these and left them that any service that you need along the way, that just gets mapped out along the way. And it's pretty much the same thing. Like if you can draw this out on a diagram and drag, drop shapes and connectors, it's pretty much the same thing. And you're bringing these connectors and these flows together to wire it up like this so that you have that same experience. But now, this is all being managed by people that can be technology generalists. These can be IAM engineers, they can be business operations people that can handle this side of it and leave the development just of the app and the infrastructure there to the developers themselves.
No, you go.
Competing.
Okay. All right. So before we show you guys the marquee demo, so again, some key takeaways that we're proposing here is that your application simply becomes the background. And this concept has been so revolutionary to our own development process, and it's really changed the game for us as far as like building out and supporting all of the BX industries, all of those different journeys that we need to build for each vertical. And again, the workflows that we build in our orchestration layer become components that we can plug anywhere into our application through our widget integration, which, by the way, requires less than 40 lines of code. And you don't even need to buy ping federate. There's no ping access. There's no bulky identity service that's part of that. You can simply tie in to our orchestration engine, build out your workflows. Again, it doesn't even have to be IAM related. It doesn't even have to be ping related. But you can integrate your workflows into your applications. It can even run in a single HTML file. And that is revolutionary.
It's like a single page app in a single page app.
Like, I don't even know what's happening right now. Like, this is crazy. So, Michael, let's show them the componentization of our own BX demo environment, which we started this presentation off with.
Yeah, I don't know if we can double time the speed.
That's okay. We'll just play it. Here, let me play it.
Okay. So this is what the change is like for us now. Once we integrated this whole orchestration platform into our applications. So first we're going to walk through, this is kind of what you saw earlier. Somebody would come through and they'd go through registration, and I'll slow down my talking a little bit, but filling out their first name, last name, whatever information you require for registration, they'll go through that process. They'll go through the sign-in.
So this is the same flow that you guys saw earlier.
Yeah. We're just kind of like recapping it for impact here in a second. So they'll log in. And I believe this was a passwordless login.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're going to receive an OTP. But everybody's familiar with this. I mean, it's the usual experience. But you understand the development that goes behind these things. But now what we're looking at is with the orchestration platform, like I said, if you can diagram it, you can basically work out what this is supposed to look like. You've got components, you've got connectors, and you just configure each of these and handle this. But this whole thing is like the entire user journey through the entire registration flow and the entire application. But now we want to say, well, what if the business comes back to you and says, you know what, we've got very critical data, we've got very critical systems that we're protecting here. We need that extra level of assurance on who the person is that's registering with us. It could be a healthcare situation, financial systems, whatever it is. And you want to be able to add a level of identity verification in there. So for that piece, as you saw here, as we were going, we disconnected the flow that was going from the user ID into multi-factor authentication. And we brought it over into a verification component, which handles identity proofing. There's a few configuration points you need to on the data that's going to be passing in from previous components.
This is real time, by the way, that I was adding these steps in.
And once you've got the identity verification piece, we want to make this easy for the user, so we're going to do this via a QR code on your phone. So we're going to pass that verification process off to the user onto their device. So we'll then add a QR code step into it. And again, it's just more configuration. It's really just selecting the items that you need. These are all pre-configured connectors and configurations that you just get to pull from, not things that you have to redevelop unless you've got your own that you want to bring into this. But again, it's the same thing. Once you develop your own connectors, they just appear here like everything else. So it's not like you have this disconnected experience even as the developer or the administrator of the platform. And then once you've got verification wired in from the user finishing registration in QR, we need a success to finish this off.
And one thing that I think we just want to point out is, I mean, we're literally dragging and dropping things, right? Like,
yeah, it's no different than like creating diagrams like we referenced earlier.
Yeah, if you can whiteboard it, you can orchestrate it. In this part, we did have an HTML template that we have pre-built to save you guys the joy of seeing us type an HTML template. So we're going to copy that here in a minute. As you can see, there's a full editor, so not only can we add in the connectors, but we have the ability to add in the user experience as well that we talked about earlier.
And again, this part is just being able to inject data from a previous connector so it just gets chained through whichever pieces or attributes that you need about the user or the experience that's currently happening.
Sorry, you guys have to watch me remove that white space. It was driving me crazy.
We do have perfectionists on the team. And I'm not a UI guy, so it's rough. Yeah, but anyway, but to go back and connect it, so all they did was add in these last three connectors, and we took the connector and routed it back to where we originally went, from user ID into multi-factor, through let's do a step up to identity verification, and route it back to so the flow can continue. But at this point, you can see we'll go back.
And we're adding the annotation at this point. So notice how very similar to your development environments, we have the ability to label and add comments and annotations through specific parts of the workflow. And you guys will see how much fun I had dragging the annotation text. You can also color the background, so if you wanted to color code. So it's a very visual tool. In this case, we're just adding the text here. So cool. Did we do it? Look at this.
Yeah, I think that was it. Save, deploy. Yeah, so now we're going to step back through. We'll go through that, and just from that alone, and like she said, she did this real time. I mean, no smoke and mirrors here. But here, user's going to come back in and register. They're going to create their account. They're coming in, but now we know we've had the requirement. We need that higher level of assurance for the identity. We want these people to be identity verified.
What is that identity
Automatic
verification?
flow change application. You
In, what was that, 2 minutes?
Yeah.
That took too long.
You didn't have to, a slow video.
Yeah, it was a very slow
You didn't
video.
have to go back to the development teams. You didn't have to look for resources. You didn't have to go through more QA cycles and the entire SDLC for that. Again, you get to let the developers do what they do best. You let the IAM and AppSec engineers do what they do best. And here, this is just walking through the identity verification process. So you can use a driver's license or a passport. All of this triggered on the device based on the QR code. And once that's completed and verified, user's registered, and you're familiar with where you went last time after multi-factor. You ended up back at authentication to log in.
So the idea is that that whole registration modal that you guys saw was a DaVinci workflow. And it just showed up on the page as if it were any other part of the page. It just showed up as a widget integration. And you can see there's so many different types of connectors that we can add. Many of them aren't even ping services. You can build connectors, as was Glenn's and John's session before us. Yeah, if you can whiteboard it, you can orchestrate it, and you can add it to your application in, in a few lines of code. So, I don't know. Is it time for the beer crawl? It's kind of all we had to show you guys. So, cool. Oh, no, go ahead.
No, please.
Is DaVinci available now?
It is.
It is.
It is, yes. Yeah.
Now, can you hook up DaVinci into like a CI/CD pipeline? Get an artifact, dev test prod.
Michael.
Yeah, no, you can. Yeah, you can. So, and we've actually, I don't know if you guys actually touched particularly on that when you're doing the connector development stuff, but yeah, you can work that through through a pipeline. I mean,
Yes.
for the most part, everything's got API interfaces to it. So,
It, In addition to that, there's variabilization that, by the way, that comes into these workflows. So you can have global variables that are inputs to your workflows. So if you wanted to, tailor the different, to different environments as you're moving through the pipeline, there's A/B testing that's available where you can change the weights so that you can actually slowly roll out versions of workflows that you might have built. So that way you can, really test it out to a, sort of a smaller part of your population before you fully turn it on 100%. So all of that is supported. So, yes?
I have a random question. So I actually used DaVinci a little bit with one of the engineers.
Awesome.
For a very specific use case. And I think what I struggle with DaVinci is knowing what to use it for. It's so robust.
Yes.
So, it'd be helpful to know if there's like a history of here's what some of our customers have been doing with DaVinci, right? Because I think from my perspective, I have a very limited scope and view of what I need to use DaVinci for.
Right.
And I think there are a lot of use cases for it. I just don't know them, and I don't know how to come up with those.
yeah. So a couple of things, and I love that question. Actually, it's one that I always get triggered on when people start asking that stuff, just from development principles and background period. But so one thing, we do actually have a lot of documentation things that are coming out around best practice guides that we worked on a couple months ago, and also things that have to do with those types of questions and those things. But yeah, so the one thing I always try and remind everybody, even internally, I do it with my own team and other people that I work with, that I remind them, because I mean, like you said, you got a very narrow focus on things that you're doing. So everybody's, because of their job roles, they've got this myopic view of things. So you start thinking just about that with whatever you're doing. But I try and pull everybody's head out of that view and remind them, well, remember, this is orchestration. So no matter what your company is, whether it's finance, retail, identity security, whatever that is, remember, orchestration is orchestration. It's not IAM, it's not retail, it's not e-commerce. It's none of those things. It's just this abstracted layer to marshal how you want to integrate with different things, but be able to orchestrate that whole thing going through it. So what do I need to do? Like, to take a step back, think outside the box, because it could be used for anything. I mean, if marketing has needs for it, that they want to be able to coordinate things, because, I mean, just sticking with the marketing theme, and they usually have multiple databases of things that they need to hit in multiple applications because they're trying to pull in analytics and things about their users and customers. Well, you can orchestrate and run through all that instead of them having to go through all these different applications. So you have, like one application using a widget in front of it, like she was talking about, and it can do that. So, because like we were saying earlier, it's I mean, if it's some HTTP-based interface for some third-party service, you can integrate with it, or you can build your own connector if it's custom, and if it's internal, you can still build your own connector. So it's just, what do I need to orchestrate? What kind of a experience or even workflow do I need internally to marshal? It doesn't have to be customer-facing. It might be for your own internal business needs inside.
Can I tack on to that? I think I remember I was working with Deller.
We love Michael.
Yeah.
I think he mentioned that there's like a marketplace for these like custom connectors that
Yes.
people might be building. Is that true? You can like.
Yeah, so absolutely. If you just, I don't have the URL handy, but just like Google Ping Identity Integration Directory.
Oh, I can probably bring it up here.
But yeah, the short answer.
Like this Google search for Ping Identity Integration Directory, it will bring you up all of our products that we have integrations with. There's filters. Just go and check the DaVinci box, and it will show you everything that we have there today. So we're not only taking, one thing we haven't touched on is not only have we had the connectors that you can bring into your flows, but we also have flows that you can bring into.
Right.
What's an authentication flow that I want to use? What's a best practice? I can download that, bring it in. I don't have to write that from scratch.
Yeah, because like all the things we showed in the beginning when we were setting the stage, like registrational things, those are so common, and so why not start with a kind of a pre-built one, and then you could always modify from there if you make it your own. But yes, we do, and they're under constant rapid development of outputting more and actually working with partners that are doing stuff as well. So.
We love that question though, because I feel like with DaVinci, like even at Ping, it's almost like you look at, like for example, our licensing processes or something like that, or some other accounting process or something like that. And then all of a sudden, when you realize DaVinci exists, you're like, wait, I can I could do this with DaVinci, right? Because what you're doing is you're enabling an entire community of technologists who may not have been deep developers before, but now they can, build workflows and author workflows and drag and drop just like how they would a Lucidchart, right? So it really opens up the community of folks within your organization to contribute to, how do we make things more efficient, and how do we, kind of make these journeys a lot easier for our customers, so.
Yeah. We had a waiting question back
Yes.
row.
This is fantastic.
Thank you.
Yay!
A lot of training, writing, logic in BigFed, right? The flows and all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Couple of questions. The first one is, the end product, is it defined as a SaaS solution?
Yes.
Okay. So is there a way, so you guys are not looking at, creating an artifact that can be deployed in a container of some sort?
Separate from the SaaS service.
I think right now there's no plans for that, but who knows? It could change in the future. But we are leading with our cloud services, so our DaVinci is offered as a cloud service at the moment. So.
And the second question is, in terms of writing conditional logic, like
Yeah.
predicate logic, is that, how do you codify it? Is that a policy language that you use?
So there's actually, and this might be answer part of your question, if not all of it, but actually as part of the connectors that you saw in there, there's one that's called like a function connector. And so that actually allows you to put in logic in there. And it's got a lot of pre-built Boolean logic that you can just use in there and just select what you want. But it also gives you the interface to actually put in your own custom logic. So you can do anything. And then so you can take in those, like when you saw us selecting certain variables and things that were coming from previous components through the flow, those will get passed in as parameters into that custom function you have, and then you can pass them back out and they can get picked up in the next ones. Yeah. Anything else? Anybody?
Oh.
My one quick question is very similar to the gentleman here. If companies that spend years doing the not easy button,
Yes.
embedding all of these rows of logic into all their products and apps, is the recommendation to pull them out and templatize them so they are available as connectors, and then use something like DaVinci to simplify the life in future? Is that the recommendation from your perspective?
So. You guys, we just love all these questions. That is actually why we titled this talk like revolutionizing your development process, because it is such a shift from, I think, how we've all been developing against IAM technologies, non-IAM technologies, right? So it is, that's sort of part of like the revolution part of it, is like getting people to think differently, but getting them to think differently that we don't have to necessarily eliminate the work that's been done before. We can, optimize the work that's done before by not having to rely on the Raspberry Pi spaghetti code, way of doing things anymore, and we can start doing things better and more efficiently. That's not to say that everything's gonna go away, it's that moving forward, you have a better way of approaching your development cycles. We face the same thing with our own, demo environment, our BX environment, where, we sort of started looking at things and, well, what makes sense to, turn into DaVinci workflows? What doesn't make sense, to turn into DaVinci workflows, right? But absolutely, I think it's such a great problem to have that, like, we have a tool that's so powerful that you're almost like, what can I do with this thing, So, but yeah, there's definitely gonna have to be like I think a certain analysis that's done of like what makes sense to optimize going forward.
I end up having a lot of conversations trying to explain identity to UX people.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
rather than that, can we abstract those out?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's what's great about this. Yeah, and I think to touch a little bit more on your thing about, is that a recommendation? It's like, it's a recommendation if it's the right thing. So like she was saying, there's that analysis has to take place, because you want to do the right thing, but you don't want to do the wrong thing, because, actually I was just talking about this the other day, at the extreme end of correcting a problem, you recreate a new problem. So it's just got to be the right thing. But yeah, this does give the ability. It's easy to port code in here because it's based on running connectors. So.
Just a comment to add on to that. I think, rapid prototyping,
Yep.
getting the user journey put into the custom
Yep.
and keep that like kind of the agility up running. So yeah, that's what I think this is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for, I don't know if any solution architects have spoken up in any of our past, sessions that we've had, but yeah, like this is like revolutionize the process for them in just creating their like real world demos or getting to, as we release new features or new products, like what's the quickest way I can like learn how this product works and what I can do with it. And this has put them leaps and bounds ahead of where they were even just when I first started like 5 years ago.
But yeah, and you know, Larkin, who's sitting in the audience, you know, she'll come in and say, well, can we have this use case or that use case? And you know, in the past, I would have had to been like, so Michael, we have a new requirement for this. They'd be like, you know, like we even made many funny mock videos of this. Yeah. But now it's so easy because it's, you know, if you can whiteboard it, you can orchestrate it, you can quickly show it, and if somebody, you know, because a lot of times that iteration cycle I think is taken for granted these days because it is so expensive to fully prototype something actually working with the services in the back end, and this really minimizes all of that. So, cool. Glad you guys are awake. Thank you.
Thanks for starting us off, Rick.
Thank you. All right, everybody enjoy the beer. You guys have fun. So, thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.